The true God will be reached, what's meant by that by Marx, by destroying the false God and all of his false creation, including his false creation of man and all material. Since Marx was like a super materialist in multiple ways, society takes the place of God. And like I said, the bourgeois class becomes the demiurge, the false God that has to be cast down, and the society created, the bourgeois society created by the bourgeoisie, has to be destroyed utterly, and bourgeois man has to be destroyed utterly, transformed or eliminated. That's what Hegel said. That's what Marx did. True society, which is his stand-in for God, which was socialism, will be reached when existing society is destroyed. And we will have arrived at that point at level 7, the spirit, from which we can go to the level of communism, the self-begetting, at which point that's not the final goal. We can reabsorb into the true cosmic whole above it that Marx says doesn't even exist. So the end point of Marx's return to God is a return to nothing. It's a little bit of an inconsistent but positively destructive philosophy in that regard, once you see it as a Hermetic construction. Man with nous, if you will, is that being when he's awakened, when he has consciousness, class consciousness, socialist consciousness, when he becomes social man or socialist man. Socialism is the consciousness. It's your orientation toward the world and how we live in it. So when you arrive at a socialist belief, you've entered into nous with everything that comes with that. You can't really do evil if it's on the behalf of the greater good. You get to excuse yourself from evil. That's from the Corpus Hermeticum. You know better than everybody, so you have the right to rule, and they don't. You have the right to raise other people's kids. You instantiate that for people like Marx in an object of human society called the state, which has to become ruthlessly tyrannical and fully totalizing so that everybody gets on board because it doesn't work otherwise. Socialism, when man and society are truly social, is gnosis. Communism is when that reaches its pinnacle and negates itself. Communism becomes the negation of the negation. The negation of the existing society is socialism, and the negation of the negation when it ascends to a higher spiritual plane is communism. That's when that finally ripens as a full positive transcendence of all private property, and we're truly self-begetting and truly as social man, as species being, then it becomes God or reabsorbs into God, and the world, in Marx's view, becomes the kingdom. Man, through social society, becomes his own savior, which gets placed in the power of the state. The state eventually withers away. It's self-sacrificial. It begets its own society and then sacrifices itself for the liberation and emancipation and rehabilitation of man. How people have avoided seeing this as religious for this long is one of the greatest tragedies and mysteries of our times. The state is the self-sacrificing savior of humanity. So what about Hermetic creation? What's Hermeticism? Let's back off of Marx. It occurs when the one, or the all, which is overabundant, unbegotten, complete, total, etc., all has to be only described in negative terms, pours himself out into the limited and the finite. Because he does this because, as an undifferentiated whole God, he cannot know himself, or in fact that he's God. He's missing one crucial piece of his totality, which is knowing that he is totality, because he has nothing to compare it to. So the process of the Hermetic belief is that God completes himself by becoming not God, negating himself, and becoming concrete in his godness by remembering that he's actually everything, which he has to do by stepping through the negative, by creating an opposite to himself, separating himself from himself, and realizing that that was fake in the first place. Being overabundant in all ways and so infinite and pouring himself into the finite causes some problems. If I gave you a glass here and told you to pour an infinite amount of water into it, what would happen? Well, it depends on how hard you pour the water. It might spill over, it might blow the glass up. Problems occur. It's messy, there's spilling, there's breakage. As God pours himself out into material being, all kinds of things shatter. The material world encaptures pieces of God's soul. Everything becomes goodness trapped inside of badness, and a thinking being gets trapped inside of a mundane form with the divine gift of being able to find the divine spark inside of the mundane and thus release it and bring it back together to complete God. When man overcomes all distinctions and realizes that man has overcome all distinctions, God sees himself in man's mind, which has no distinction, so it's man singular and plural at the same time, and realizes, oh, it was me all along. And he actualizes, and then there's no differentiation between anything, and we all go off together to the pleroma or to heaven. The technique of this is the dialectic, the mixture of opposites until you don't see them as opposites anymore. In other words, a form of deliberately confusing yourself, a form of deliberately sacrificing your discernment so that you can get along with a bigger whole of people. And so the dialectic progresses. In particular, good and evil are blended in this. Evil achieves good. That's Hegel's cunning of reason. Tyranny achieves liberation. That's Marx and Lenin. That's literally Leninism. He said when the state reaches its pinnacle of power, that's the moment it will wither away, because it's completely ruined everybody, brainwashed them, or killed everybody who dissents, and there's no need for a state to manage it anymore. Man is posited in this cosmogony as the unique being who has a divine soul and thus can identify and collect the gold of being that's been scattered by the spilling over of the undifferentiated whole into finite reality. It's man's job to go around through philosophy and theology and Hermetic wizardry to find the divine by removing the distinctions that make things mundane. That will lead us to realize God. And like I said, when man realizes God, God realizes God, and we all get back together. Perfection follows. There's your utopia at the end of the rainbow. And if you wonder, does this sound a lot like alchemy? It's literally where alchemy comes from. We're going to get the gold out of the base metals. You're going to do something to lead, and it's going to turn into copper, and that's somehow going to turn to this, and you're going to end up with gold. That's how you get from death to life, or the elixir of life. This is what this is about.